And they made one.
Yeah. But you had a
there was
1K
Mo Richardson
HDMI, HMI. You had a 1K and put out so much light. Yeah, I think it was an Airy. I think it was an Airy Sun.
It's probably
long
bright
fixture.
blue covered.
Yeah,
colored.
bright blue, long, big mirror, big parabolic mirror to toss as much light out as possible.
Big transformer.
Separate power supply, definitely, and probably had to be plugged into 220. So we probably had to gaff it differently. Ugh.
You know, a lot of people have eye problems working with HMIs from the day.
Yes, I'm not at all surprised.
There was some hearing loss back in the audio from the audio people as well. So my experience with ARC was projection. It's a tiny little theater in McPherson, Kansas, and I would have to put the little carbon rod, light it just before going to the second camera.
Our high school follow spots use that technology.
Wow.
You screwed in the thing until it arced and then backed them off a little.
And
bright light.
And have to polish that's where I learned about Bonami, whatever that.
Bonami, yes.
Yeah, and you would have to polish the lens.
Called it Bonami.
Smoke used to come out of the top of them like it was on fire.
Yeah, and if you get some idiot who liked to use them on the stage, your eyes and your lungs would you couldn't deal with it after about 11 o'clock in the morning.
Well, the big ones used to have a vent at the top, and then I would see them occasionally.
But then
the brutes.
You'd go up in the perms above the stage, and it was like a blanket of smog up there from the carbon.
Up in the fly loft. You don't want to be in the pin rail gallery for that.
Yeah.
Hey, kids, that's the way we did it back in the day.
I just found it.
And we loved it.
Torches to light the scene.
And it had no effect.
And then we moved on to JVC projectors. Remember those old things that were big, and you had to put these blue glasses on or whatever they were to keep from burning your eyes out.
Yeah, Zygmunt, I think, used pre-flashing on The Long Goodbye Altman film. Yeah.
It's Doug Ferguson.
Yeah. Dougie's here.
Where's the
He's
cat?
got all his old 16 millimeter take-up.
There's the cat's tail.
There we go.
Is that Merle?
It literally just jumped up.
It heard you, Alex.
It's a photobomb.
By the way, I did post a link yesterday for the HDR test. They're getting interesting. I've been playing with them a little bit. There's some people that just like Alexander and Guy, and especially Guy, just pops out just like wow, like it just jumps out. But it's worth checking out when I post those because they're useful. We're getting there. It looks good. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and digital production. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And we don't often get all the top level, quote unquote, top level graphics in one place, except for American football. So we get to see like what happens when you have all the money to spend on it and how different networks decide to play with that. So we're going to kind of bounce around through a couple captures of some of the stuff. It's probably important to watch it live because I don't know how much YouTube will let us keep it up. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. But we'll talk a little bit about NBC, ABC, and Fox and how they handled that. So we'll stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we got?
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. Andy Kokendorfer is our first question. Andy's from Ventura, Florida, by the way. What would you suggest for installed ceiling mics? Are they Dante enabled? Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I wish they sounded better than they did. I've yet to find a pair that don't sound like an audiophile grade speakerphone. That said, sure are Dante enabled, and they are the best.
Yeah, there is an array that you can. I was trying to find it here, but there's an array that's used. The only time I've seen it is in Pac-12, the press room for Pac-12 in San Francisco. And it is basically, I don't know, 50 or 60 of these hanging mics so that anybody sitting there can sit there and just simply, start talking. But I think that, and that's the only time, and it's really not designed for broadcast. It's just designed that people can hear it. I mean, it is designed to broadcast, but it just means no one has to raise their voice. I think it's a very expensive solution. I think it's probably a $100,000 solution. Once you drop below that, I agree with Jason. Ceiling mics almost never work well. I mean, it's okay if you're just doing kind of a wonky, we can kind of hear you talk kind of thing, but they tend to be very roomy. I haven't heard any arrays that I would want to listen to. So I think that's I haven't heard of any arrays I think Sennheiser and Shure make some that might work in those areas. We haven't tested them enough to do them, but every time I've seen these in the real world, I haven't been impressed. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana, asking, has anyone checked out SocialStream.ninja for chat integration?
Chat integration. So this is SocialStream.ninja is a place for you to manage your live streams and all your inputs. Now, I'd be interested to see, when they talk about this, whether they're supporting, and the answer is not YouTube. I don't think that they're supporting YouTube, which is the one that you'd think you'd want the most. So YouTube is very hard to support because of the token system that's being used by them. So that's kind of the difficulty there. I haven't tested it yet. But what it does look like is it gives you the ability to kind of grab onto those comments. I will be honest that I think that integrating live comments without moderation into a live stream is not a good idea. It's like, you want to take things that you want, and this might have more moderation tools in it, but it doesn't look like the moderation tools are super well developed yet. And it looks like, hey, you can put this stuff up there. And I'm not sure that that's what I would recommend. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Ventura, Florida. What is the most effective method to install audience mics for a classroom? Assume audience size of 100. Mics must be installed, not wireless, and passed around during question and answer with the professor on Zoom. Thanks.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, we talked a little bit about this problem in the first question, and it's always going to be a problem because of physics. And for those of you who have paid any attention to audio, you know that it relates to the inverse square principle, which we've talked about here on the show a good little bit. But basically, that tells you that if a good sounding mic, let's say the mic that I'm using, which is roughly a foot from my mouth, is picking up my voice at a certain level, if you move that mic to 10 feet away from me, and most ceiling mounted mics in classrooms are that kind of distance away, that lowers the sound pressure level hitting the diaphragm and the microphone by a factor of 100, right? It's not 1, it's 10 feet, and 10 squared is 100. So if somebody coughs 3 rows away from you and they happen to be 5 feet away from that mic in the ceiling, as opposed to the person you're trying to hear, they're only going to be 25 times quieter than they would be if the mic was a foot from them. And so they're going to be much louder than the person you're trying to listen to in the audience who's suppressed by 100 times. It's purely physics. So what Alex was talking about, they're trying to put lots and lots and lots of microphones in a room so that you can get a mic as close as possible, but you're probably always going to be 4 to 6 feet above if you're doing ceiling mounted mics. The amplitude of those mics are going to be much lower than they would be if you had something in their hand and they were talking to it. And you just can't beat the physics of this. A lot of people have tried, which is why everybody hopes that the designers can come up with something, but mics just don't work. We hear shotgun mic. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't reach out and grab it. It has to wait for the sound to hit the diaphragm of the mic, and distance is everything when you're playing that game.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you can do, again, some of the arrays that Sennheiser and Shure and a couple other folks build, we might be able to put into those arrays, and those arrays can kind of do beam forming and figure out kind of where it is. If you're not doing it for broadcast, I mean, just to make sure that the professor can hear it, might be okay. I mean, the big problem we have with classrooms and I've done a lot of remotes where I'm coming in over Zoom or Meet or many other Skype, and I'm talking to people in the classroom and doing a talk and doing some demos and so on and so forth. And the real challenge is that as those mics move away, it's just really hard for me to understand what people are saying. So I spend most of my energy as a teacher trying to figure out what they're saying, not thinking about what the answer is or think about the actual content. I'm just trying to find the words that are coming out of their mouth. And so you really have to, what I would say is whatever you do, you want to be very, very conscious of that as you're looking at it. The thing is that, yeah. So I think that's what you really want to think about. The real way to handle classrooms, if you want to make them remote, is to treat the classroom. So that means soft walls, carpets, acoustic tiles on the ceiling. Do all those things, and that's what everybody should be doing for conference rooms and classrooms and everything else, is to really treat them so that they are acoustically viable. Then you can possibly make an array work, or you can, when we install mics, we just put SM58s in the rows. Like here, walk over there if you want to ask a question. If you don't want to pass them around, you get people to walk over to it. I would also highly recommend, some kind of question management system. I know we all love open mics and speakers. Once you get to 100 people, open, kind of an open mic situation is just really, people aren't very good at forming their sentences. so when they're talking, and they'll talk for 5 minutes about things that no one cares about, and then ask a question that only they are interested in. That's like 95%. You get that one magic moment, and then everyone goes, "Well, we don't have that magic moment." And I'm like, okay, well, there's 9 out of 10 of those, or 95 out of 100 of those that were not magic moments. They were boring and droning, and so that's what the text fixes. And then you can what I would recommend is thinking about text with microphones in a couple places. If the professor needs more information, then just have them go to the mic rather than having every question come in from the mic. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Alex covered just about everything I was going to say. And acoustics are a big part of that. And a phase-steered microphone in a classroom the size of 100 is a pretty good sized classroom. And if it's a tiered classroom like college classrooms are, where the students go up the side of the wall, basically, on tiers, different tiers, the acoustics are arranged to send sound from the front of the hall to the back, not back to the front. So the acoustics are normally trained in the opposite direction, so are designed for the opposite direction. So you're fighting upstream when you're trying to hear the students back to the front. You could try a phase array, but with that many people, that spread out, I think Alex said, put a SM58 on a stalk in the aisleways and have them get up and come to it if they have to respond.
Yeah, you're just getting, at 100 people, you're getting to a point where a lot of the stuff that you would think is automatic doesn't really work that well. It might work well enough. I mean, so the only thing you can do is test it. and figure it out. Dan Huber does a bunch of this stuff, I think, in a Penn State extension. Or sorry, Dan, if I said the wrong thing, if it's not Penn State, but he may be a person to talk to on Discord, because I know that he's been trying to figure out that for a couple of years during COVID and then coming out of COVID, building those hybrid classrooms. So you might want to check in with him and see if he's available on Discord. Next question.
From Patrick Shones in Little Rock, Arkansas, I've got an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO and a Blackmagic Design Studio 4K Pro camera in my studio. Recently, all tally and camera control unit functions stopped working. I've factory reset the ATEM, double-checked all patches that they're correct. Nothing. Any ideas from the Brain Trust?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, it depends on what you mean by patches. If by patches you mean cables, I would check that my converter is up to date. 7.6.2 dropped on December the 7th, and that may fix your problem. If not, I would go as far as thinking about just replacing that bidirectional converter and then take it up with Blackmagic.
I don't think that. Yeah. I'm curious as to whether you are doing it. I'm not sure if you're using a bidirectional or whether that ATEM is SDI. So I do think that it might be in the, let's see, cameras. If all of them failed, though, it seems like
could be the camera number too, I guess.
It could be a camera number. So I would check the camera numbers. I'd be curious about what the cable lengths are, to see if that might be an issue. And but it is odd that all of them failed at the same time and that they were working before. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Don't the converters need to be bidirectional because of the information going back and forth? And if they're not properly powered?
I think that he had a working system that stopped working. I think that's the issue, is that all of the stuff was, I'm assuming that all of the stuff was working before. So it recently all the tally and CCU functions stopped working. That's an odd thing to happen all at one time. It seems I would lean towards the ISO having some issue, because if all the cameras are stopping to work, if one camera was stopping, it might be the camera, it might be the micro converter. But if all of them have stopped, something's changed in the state inside of the ATEM. So I think that's probably a call about Black. I think I don't have an answer for it. I think it's probably a call Blackmagic thing. Next question.
Next question coming in from Ari Block in Tel Aviv, Israel. Will the Flow 8 have enough gain for the SM7B without a CloudLifter? I seem to recall it was at its limit for the PR40.
I don't know if we have anyone here with a Flow 8 to test that. I think that it was I find that the SM7B has less gain than the PR40. So if the PR40 was at the edge, the SM7B will be more at the edge. But I'm not 100% certain. I don't know if anyone in our event chat are Flow 8 users that could give us some input there. We're kind of going out and reaching out to our what do they call it? The second when you can reach out during the question and answer thing on a game show, but no one has an answer. But I think that maybe someone can look at the numbers. But I think that it would be if the PR40 is on the edge, then the SM7B will be over that edge. So we should definitely check that out. Next question.
And Shaw, Columbus, Ohio, any recommendations to prevent audio drift when recording Zoom calls via ScreenFlow on a Mac? Due to presumably different clock speeds, my local recorded audio slowly drifts away from the recorded video on Zoom. Any easy way to fix?
Go, Jesse.
I'm going to give you two suggestions on how to deal with this. The first is difficult but cheap. The second is expensive but easy. So the first thing you can do is clap at the top and at the end of any recording, and then you can see how much it drifts because you sync up to that first clap, and then you'll see how far off the second clap is, and you can calculate the percentage of drift based on that. I would recommend doing that over several recordings, several longer recordings, because this might be related to your CPU usage. The more that you're using your CPU to process information instead of just recording what's happening, the more the drift might be affected. That's the difficult but cheap way. The expensive way is to offboard all recording to dedicated devices. So get an audio recorder just for recording the sound, and get a video recorder just for recording the video. Don't rely on internal or cloud components for recording multiple streams that you expect to sync later. Record them on dedicated devices.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to suggest the same thing. Get you a game recorder, AV recorder. Just put it in line with the HDMI and make sure your camera and audio are in sync going into that, and the recording will be in sync in that H.264. You won't have to sync them up in post. The other problem that you're dealing with is since video is going over and being recorded by Zoom, there can be frame dropouts. It can drop frames. If it drops frames, it'll slip out of sync. So you have that to deal with as well.
Go ahead, Bill.
I just looked it up from the last question. It looks like that SM7B has a negative 59 dB output level. So I would think a CloudLifter would be a good friend to you right there.
But I would try to just find something that didn't require a CloudLifter. It's kind of a piece of junk. So you don't want to really put CloudLifters into your pipeline if you don't have to. To go back to this, so if the ScreenFlow is really powerful because you can record a lot, you can record your mouse separately and your keystrokes, and so if you're doing all that kind of thing, ScreenFlow is really useful. But recording straight video, I agree that finding an external one, and you could even do things like a Zoom, you could use an ISO, like an ATEM ISO, the little one, and then you could record that out. You could use Courtney's tool. I just used it last night because YouTube finally closed the loop. There was a loop. There was a little loophole with YouTube TV that you could just screen capture Chrome. And I realized that last night while I was getting ready for the show today that they took that loophole out. So now if you hit screen capture, it just turns black. And so I had to dig out a Pix 240 and I just looped the HDMI through it. And it works just fine. so anyway, so that's the to grab the stuff that we needed. So anyway, so the using a hardware recorder that has the embedded audio is going to be your best solution as far as keeping that in sync. The drop frames shouldn't be a problem to keep it in sync because it'll recorrect itself on the way out. But like it's dropping the frames, but so it stays in time. So it shouldn't be a problem there. If it's drifting at a very predictable rate, it could be something in the if it is actually recording two separate files, it could be one's in 29.97, the other one's in 30 or something like that, and that can also that'll slip a couple frames a second. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, once again, the Pix 240 to the rescue. I just wanted to comment on the using the CloudLifter. I don't think it's so much that it's a bad piece of equipment, it's bad application because it brings up the noise floor along with everything else, and that's the problem with using it.
It's a bad piece of equipment. It should not be in your pipeline. No one should use a CloudLifter in production. It's a cheap electronics that you're putting into your main input. Like that's your preamp. Like that. A CloudLifter becomes your preamp, and now you're spending no money on a preamp and pushing it through. It's a horrible idea. So
never mind.
No, next question.
Next question in from Ari Block in Tel Aviv, Israel. I'm in the market for a few smallish RGB video lights for background lighting of personal setup. I currently use the Pixel G1s, but it has no app control. Suggestions?
Good, Mitchell.
I've got the Elgato right behind me, and it does have a app control. You can sit there and turn the volume up and down, or not volume, the level up and down, and do all kinds of fun stuff. And most importantly, it plays nice with your TV cameras.
Good, Courtney.
I'm just using the FEIT color change bulbs, RGBW. They look like a regular LED bulb. They plug in, they're Wi-Fi controllable. They come with an app. You can control the color and the brightness from the app, and they seem to work fine. They also work with the Alexa and Google Home, so you can just give them commands to change color or go brighter or dimmer.
Yeah, the Aperture 7Cs also work really, really well. That's what I take to hotels with me. I just screw those in. I was using the Hues, but when I turned them down, I started to see a little bit of rolling. And that's what you want to do. As soon as you buy them, whatever you're going to buy, turn it down to its lowest setting and see if you see any rolling, because what it does is it oftentimes just slows the LED down so that it can to be dimmer, and it'll go under your frame rate. And so you want to look at you want to take a look at that. And so put an LED, if you buy one, within the return time that you have there, put it in, turn it all the way down, bring it up just a little bit, and see if you're seeing any kind of rolling or any kind of flickering, and then you'll know whether that. And most consumer ones, that's going to be a problem. But I think I haven't seen that with the Aperture 7C because it's more of a production. It's designed to go in and be an RGB inside for production. So had a little more luck with that. The other thing that I use for mine are the 6Cs. Now the 6C, this makes it confusing. Aperture makes the 7C, but Nanlite makes the 6C. And the 6Cs are the ones that I travel with. So the Nanlite 6Cs are the ones I travel with as well. The 7Cs go into the fixtures. The 6Cs I just lay on the ground and I use them to light myself. So they're a little bar, and I don't have one within arm's reach. They're back there somewhere. But the 6Cs are the ones that I use there, and I put them on two little stands on either side of me. I throw two on the ground, and then I sync them up with the 7Cs to make that work. Next question.
Next one in from Kazmu Kajar in Cape Town, South Africa. Attached two StreamDecks to my M1 Mac Mini using the CompanionElgato plugin in Companion settings. How do I control the SD independently? Any action on Companion buttons on StreamDeck 1 mirrors on the SD2?
I go, Jason.
Yeah, after you plug in the second one, you need to redetect the USB, and it'll scan the USB bus and see them as two separate things, and then you'll be done.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Ventura, Florida, asking, thoughts on the new paid version of ChatGPT?
Go ahead, John.
I haven't seen the official announcement yet. I've seen all the speculation that people are quoting $42 a month. But it's going to be integrated into all the Microsoft applications soon, and it's going to be interesting to see how they roll that model out. So having it write in Word and PowerPoint and Outlook to write your prose generatively is going to be interesting. But yeah, Sam Altman, the CEO, said that they will start charging for it eventually.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I'm looking at all of this as investment in the future because it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And for me as an early adopter, I often have to, spend a little bit right now, but that it's a subscription, that's actually kind of a good thing because I've dumped a lot of money in things that never went anywhere. So it's a tool that is going to be a part of our future.
Good, Jesse.
I see a lot of parallels between the mass adoption of AI and the mass adoption of social media. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we made with the mass adoption of social media was believing the sales pitch that these tools were free. And I am so glad to see that with AI, there are costs, upfront costs associated with the use of the tool sets.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was curious whether that price was for a consumer or for someone who wanted to integrate ChatGPT into a commercial product. That is a pretty high monthly rate for just a consumer that was mentioned by John. I'm not sure. As Microsoft has just done a big investment in ChatGPT or OpenAI, it remains to be seen. I tried to get on yesterday and couldn't even get in. So the servers were so overloaded, and I don't know if it's still up yet. It was I tried many, many times over the course of about 2 hours and could not even log in. So it's getting a lot of attention right now.
Go, John.
So the prices for the API are published, all the way from 4/100ths of a penny for the low end model, all the way up to 2 cents for the high end model Da Vinci. So those are published today. They've been published there for a while up on their site, and it's expensive. If you do the math, if you use Da Vinci, it's really expensive.
Yeah, I have to admit that I go up to ChatGPT a lot. I mean, I usually have a window open that I'm playing with, and about half the time I can't get anything because it's overcrowded. And so it's a lot of fun when it works. I'm slowly mapping the times that make the most sense to do ChatGPT because I'm starting to notice some patterns of when people are using them and so on and so forth. But I think that I'm one of those people that wants the Wi-Fi at the hotel to be $35 a night because I want it to actually work. So I want it to be, I don't want it, when I say free Wi-Fi, I know that I'm not going to get anything that actually is production ready. So I'm all for them charging for it. And and I think that they'll probably still have a free version, but it'll probably stay crowded because it'll be one of those things that is hard to support. I mean, it's just you can't keep on doing all this stuff, and at some point someone's got to pay for it. So like it has to get paid for, and I would rather I pay for Midjourney, and it's probably one of my more enjoyable subscriptions. In fact, if I was going to give up subscriptions, I'd probably kill a bunch of my my streaming connections before I killed Midjourney. So I think that I get more enjoyment out of Midjourney than probably at least Netflix and Disney Plus. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe they priced it that high to keep students from using it on their term papers. They didn't want to plop down $35 just to log in, and so it's like surge pricing at Disneyland. They use the price as a deterrent to misuse.
Maybe that could be the case as well. It's a pretty amazing thing, though. I mean, I love playing with it. I have to admit, I ask it to do all kinds of things. I asked it to I was thinking about a party, and we were talking, Kevin and I were talking about doing a Star Trek, like if you're doing a Star Trek dinner or something like that, we were thinking about fortune cookies and that were Star Trek oriented. So just to ask ChatGPT, give me 20 fortune cookies that are, based on Star Trek. And it'll give you these incredible, and we did it on Star Wars. We did it as a Romulan. Like we said, give me, 20 fortune cookies for Romulans. And it just gave us these incredible Romulan. And then you went to Klingon, and then we went to, it was so much fun. And I think that people who get worried about it are not paying attention to how amazing it is to do.
Forget that this is a creative thing that's awesome.
It's, we were, I'm not going to show you. I won't bore you with the images, but we were someone that I worked with just got promoted to a head of something, and I just said he was the Grand Poobah, of these things. And then I just went to Midjourney and I said Grand Poobah in his throne room holding a scepter, and I just drew it all up and it created this really funny picture, and I sent it to him, and it was I just really it's just so much fun, and I know that it'll probably do a lot of horrible things, but we should enjoy it while it's still fun, and we don't know how bad it can get. Next question.
Michael Patra from Poland asking, what is the best way to create live captions at a streaming conference? Maybe delay of stream is the solution. Any advice?
Go ahead, Doug.
So we used a service called EEG Falcon, or Falcon by EEG. It's where you send your stream to them, they do the captioning, and then they send the stream back out. I don't know if it's the best, but I know that is what we've used in the past.
Yeah, a lot of people use Falcon, and so Falcon is a solid solution. It pre-existed the merger between AI Media and EEG. EEG has been the standard pretty much for the last, 10 or 15 years in the United States. And so they are the ones that build all the hardware that a lot of us have used. And so the EEG 492 is the current hardware that you can get. And that the 492 is a piece of hardware. It's a 1U piece of hardware. Before that was the 491, as you know. So anyway, 492 adds a couple things, 3G and a couple other things. And basically what happens is in the 492 or any of the EEG models that are in that similar vein, you pass your SDI through it, and then what it does is you can have a stenographer who is typing away, and they can be connected directly to that EEG, and they can. This is if you don't have a way to do this remotely, like what Doug's doing. They can be typing away in their stenographer, and it will insert their captions into the line 21, the VANC data inside of the SDI signal. So then it's embedded. And if your stream supports 608, 708, it'll go out, and you can make some basic definitions. Most of those definitions are defined by the stenographer, but you can have those there. And so that's I think it's like a $5,000 or $7,000 box, but it will do it, and it will insert it. And if the stenographer is remote, you can use a service called iCap inside of that, and iCap is capable then of the iCap setting is capable of having the stenographer listen to it. It'll actually pass audio to them, and they can type in, and it'll come back and send it and reinsert it again. So that's one way that you can have your captionist local or remote, then, and that's if you really have a closed system and you really want it to work. You can also, the iCap will attach to the Falcon. I think it's the Falcon technology. It's either Falcon or AI Media, and do exactly what Doug's doing. So it'll reinsert it locally to make that actually run there, to make that work. Or you can use Falcon. The thing with Falcon is you have to, I can't use Falcon on my stuff because I'm passing it through that, and I need to create sometimes lots of ladders. And so it would be difficult to pass it through effectively. It'd be more cumbersome for what we do. But you can stream it through Falcon and have it do exactly what Doug discussed there. The other thing that EEG has, which is kind of cool, is a little web app, or not, it's not a web, I don't know if it's a web app or it's an app that will take that captioning and put it on the phone. So you can make it available. I think it's like $2,700 per year per language, but you can actually have it. So that way everybody in the room can get the captioning. If they want to open it up on their phone and look down, if they're, that way you can make a couple different languages, you can do all those things, and that works as well for translation. So a lot of options. We had EEG on maybe a year ago. Probably ought to bring it on again to answer questions like this. But those are some of the options. It's a pretty, the problem with captions is they will become, we always joke that they're like 1% of the audience and 90% of the work. Once you start adding captions, your entire pipeline really becomes obsessed with them. You have to figure out how you're going to do all this and how you're going to get it. And you feel like all your energy goes into captions, but the return now is getting higher and higher and higher. In addition to making it more accessible, there's a lot of people that want to see the captions before they turn the audio on. So from a marketing perspective, it's worth adding the captions. And it's just the right thing to do, for a lot of people to be able to see it. So even though it's a lot of work, definitely highly recommend it. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York, asking, any way to ensure people update Zoom to the latest client to make sure everyone can see the question and answer feature when I need to get either ZoomISO or ZoomOSC in the meeting? Any way to sneak either product past the forced client update?
Wait, I thought that any way to sneak either product.
It appears he's looking to get his clients to update Zoom kind of by force.
Yeah, so you can do that. So what you do, and you'll see us do it. I usually wait just a little bit. So there was a bunch of new features that were dropped. I usually wait a little bit, but you'll see us probably at the end of this week or next week. We'll turn up the dial on our system, which means that all the meetings created by office hours will require you to update. So you can set that in your admin settings that just say you can't enter this meeting without the update. I've learned not to do that the day it happens because we destabilized a bunch of things. When we did that, there was a bunch of things that were like, maybe they don't work perfectly. And there were new buttons in new places. And we had an event like 2 days later and everyone was like, what happened? Why is this all broken? And it was my fault. No, it was a phone. I know. That's one of the reasons we moved the office hour stuff out. So you'll probably see us ratchet that up a little bit to make sure. But you can put that in, that's in the admin settings, and then you can decide how far back. So you can say, I want to go back 6 versions or 3 versions or just a single version. So that's the way to update those things. And I'm trying to see if, next question.
Jesse Kester in Glendale asking, is anyone else having trouble linking Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera Master RAWs from an ATEM ISO live switch in Resolve 18? When I go back to 17, RAWs link fine. Tested on Mac, Ventura, Intel, and M1.
I haven't tried to link those back in 18. If you're having that problem, it could be just an update bug, and I would highly recommend calling support and letting them know it's there. But I haven't done it in 18. Have done it successfully in 17. So we'll have to do some more testing. Next question.
Bill Davis in San Diego, California, and right here on our panel. What's the thinking on the Stable Diffusion class action litigation filed this week in San Francisco?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I think they're going to have a really tough time succeeding in this case if they're suing Stable Diffusion, because they're artists, and artists are saying, well, they copied, my style without, asking my permission or reimbursing me. Well, every artist on earth has copied, has looked at other art for reference and, paints paintings based on art that they've seen in the past. And, these AI models are just training themselves with computer vision instead of human vision. And it's taking things they learned from all the arts of all the artists on earth. or that have been publicly viewable, and creating something new. So every artist that ever paints a picture creates something new from stuff they've seen in the past or from their concept or imagery that they conceive of, and a lot of it is borrowed from other artists. So I don't see how they're possibly going to succeed on that unless they train a AI model with all the intellectual property law cases that have ever been submitted, and have an AI judge then make the decision.
Good, Bill.
Well, it's interesting, and I only brought it up because something passed my web feed today. There is this big litigation, and they put up a website, StableDiffusionLitigation.com. And the one thing that it does, I'm not taking a stand one way or another because I really don't know enough about it, but they explained a lot of the factors going into this lawsuit and what I thought were really easy to digest terminology. They delved into the law, but made it, I think, accessible. So if you're interested in this big battle that's going to be coming, it might be a good place to start.
Go ahead, John.
Attorneys looking for a payday. I can't wait to replace my attorney with ChatGPT one day. It's going to be a great day.
Yeah, I think this was going to happen. It had to happen. It's like someone had to test it in the courtroom, and it'll probably go all the way to the Supreme Court to make a decision. I do think that the case is very weak. I just don't think that, and I think that's why you're putting up a website, they're really trying to try the idea in the court of public opinion as well as in the court of law. And try to gin up some interest in this process. The problem is everyone's having too much fun with it. So they're gonna, the longer this lasts and the longer it drags out, the more it becomes embedded, and the less it will matter. The other thing is that I think that it was going to happen. It had to happen. It is potentially devastating for artists to litigate this. And the reason for that is that right now, everyone's afraid of the boogeyman. They're afraid that they'll lose a suit or they'll lose whatever. If they lose this case, no one's going to be afraid anymore. So as soon as there is precedent, so if they are risking everything on this case, because I work in big corporations, and they all sit there going, well, we don't want to get sued. This could be hundreds of millions of dollars. This could be blah, 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 blah. As soon as they know, they just step forward, and so what you'll see is if they lose this case, the chances of winning are very low, and the possibility of what will happen. It will mean that Google, Microsoft, all the big companies that have been hesitant to show their AI will be releasing tens of products into the market. It'll explode, so the industry, isn't looking forward to this art, because there's a risk that everything could be lost. But the risk is low that everything will be lost. And once they have precedent, they're going to go crazy. And everyone's been, that's why Google and Microsoft and all these people haven't done it in the past, is because of they're concerned about some public opinion, but they're really concerned about litigation because they're big targets. Allowing these smaller organizations to take the arrows, as they, and figure it out is what they're all waiting for. But they've got a lot of money and a lot of interest in this, and so it's an extremely risky maneuver by artists to take this on. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I just wanted to ask a question on behalf of our viewers. Are we talking Mid-Journey here?
Oh, I think they're talking everything. They're just.
Okay.
They may be talking. Stable diffusion. They're trying to make a precedent. They probably tried to pick the one that was the weakest, probably the weakest argument of stable diffusion, because you're downloading a model onto a computer, and but I think that they're going to call into question all of the stuff. And again, if they lose, it's over. It's going to come down the path so fast. There's going to be $1 trillion spent the year after on AI. The year after they lose this case, if they lose it, and they won't win it for years. And by the time they win it, it'll be embedded into everything, and we'll be always in it. Like at some point, the Supreme Court will look at it going, well, Napster eventually got knocked down, but it didn't matter. It was the industry, the changes had already happened. Go ahead, Bill.
The plaintiffs in this are Stability AI, DeviantArt, and Midjourney. So they're
the plaintiffs?
Those are the plaintiffs. That's what it says. Plaintiffs,
not the defendants.
Oh, the defendants. I'm sorry. Those are the defendants. So
so they're hitting after all of them. They're trying to stop this flow, and I just don't think it's going to stop. And I think the problem is that they it will be it's catastrophic if they lose for them. And again, it was going to happen no matter what. It's just that it'll accelerate everything if there's precedent. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I'm once this case is settled or kicked up to the Supreme Court, the next case is going to be the reverse, whether Stable Diffusion and can sue based on somebody using something generated with their intellectual property, Stable Diffusion, created, in a commercial sense, so that they can sue somebody else for copyright infringement of infringing on the copyright of those artificial intelligences.
Yeah, and I have to say that after using a lot of Midjourney and ChatGPT, I do think that a prompt engineer or a diffusionist, which is what we started to call it, there is a skill there. Like there is a, like thinking about how you ask the question definitely drives the answer, and it is not. I think that they're going to be able to prove that you're not just turning something on in the same way that there is with synthesizers. They make a lot of noise on their own and they can make all kinds of things on their own, but someone's still hooking them up and driving them to make them do the thing that they're doing. So I think that it's going to be, or even using samples and so on and so forth. I think it's, again, I don't think that the court is going to be on the side of the artists in this case because, all artists, almost all artists stealing from somebody, and so, next question.
Jesse Kester from Glendale asking, Oscar nominations dropped today. Any hot takes from the panel?
Go ahead, Sky.
I'm looking at the list, and Brandon Fraser has been away for a while, and why ever he was away, there's all kinds of issues there. But it's good to see him back. I wish him the best. But I'm also looking at the Fablemans and the Steven Spielberg, again at 70. What did he say? He's 74, and he's telling his own story as a story. I think is intriguing, and of course, I'm very interested in Brendan Gleeson for no other reason than he's got a great last name.
Well, I don't see. I didn't see the ones listed for best picture. Is it like buried somewhere?
I got actor, actress, director.
Best picture. Here
best picture.
There's 10 of them.
There's 10. We were talking about that in the pre-show. That's actually why I raised my hand. It's like 10. I've only seen 3 of them. I feel really uneducated here.
Yeah. I think I will be really surprised if Brendan Fraser doesn't win an Oscar. Like, I just feel like this is his moment. We have to remember that Oscars aren't really like an actual objective view. It's the political scene, in Hollywood. And right now he's got the juice, he gave a great acceptance speech at the last one. And, I just feel like he's kind of in the zone. Go ahead, Bill.
They could go with Austin Butler, though, because that Elvis movie, his impression of Elvis was so spot on and yet compelling. And you can't leave Colin Farrell out of that either. That everybody who has seen the Banshees movie has said it's just extraordinary. I haven't seen either of them. I have seen Elvis, but I haven't seen the other one. It's going to be an interesting race this year.
Yeah, I put about 80% chance that Fraser gets the win, just because, again, there's just a lot of he's older. He's got how many times is this going to happen? People take that all into account. Like how are we going to and I think that's we'll see. We'll see. But I think that's the most likely outcome. Next question.
For your consideration, Douglas Carmichael asked, have you ever dealt with client resistance or misconceptions based upon the brands of equipment you use? I've heard of that happening with brands like Behringer, Mackie, or Peavey.
Go ahead, Bill.
Everybody who's built a business has had to face this. You walk out, when you're starting, you usually can't finance or start out with top quality equipment. So you're using something that is at the bottom end of the market. You're trying to learn your craft. You may be walking out with a camcorder rather than a full scale rig. And at some point you have to confront the fact that what your perception in the market becomes as important as what you can actually do. We used to joke about the fact that I was going to make a Betacam size box that I could put my small Sony cameras in just so it looked like I had a bigger camera. And, it was driven by that perception among clients. And when I finally graduated to a shoulder mount full size camera, it took there was a sense of relief, walking in with this, they're not going to know that I'm shooting on an industrial high heat camera rather than a Betacam, but it looks enough the same so that people it just got check marked off. And it's just the way of the world, I think.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it used to be an issue, Douglas. If you didn't walk in with a Sony or an Ikigami, you would get questioned about it. But what's happened in the business is that the gatekeepers and the companies that made decisions about who got to do what, who understood the equipment and the people doing it and who was appropriate for this particular job, are gone now, and it's being replaced by people that are accountants. And they don't know. They just care that you get the job done to a certain level.
I go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, they do care. There's a lot of brand snobbery, and if a cameraman shows up with a DSLR to shoot your $2 million commercial with, they're going to look down their nose. And however, if a cameraman owns a Red, let's say, and the client wants to shoot with an Arri Alexa because that's what they use on all their commercials, he may deliver something worse because he rents an Arri Alexa for that one shoot, where they insisted that he use that because he's not familiar with the camera. He could have probably delivered a better product with his Red because he knows it and he uses it all the time. And the sad thing is that brand snobbery can affect the quality of the product negatively.
Go ahead, Sky.
We found the brand snobbery in the post-production world of compositing, early days of what was called the Flame, very high-end compositing system that Autodesk owns it now, but originally it was Discrete Logic, and they promoted to the end user of the agencies in Chicago. And consequently, when the production assistant would call, says, do you have a Flame? They weren't asking, can you produce a quality product with whatever hammer or tool that you have? They were specifically having been branded to by the manufacturer that we need a Flame because that's the tool that's going to get our commercial the best quality polish.
Good, Bill.
And don't forget that we're also in an era where phones are so capable that it's possible to shoot something really good on a phone. But if you show up with a phone as your primary camera, people are going to go, well, wait a second, I got the same phone in my pocket. Why can't I just do this myself? And it's hard to convince them that it's never the piano, it's always the piano player, and that somebody with great skills can use a lesser camera and get better results than somebody who's incompetent using the best camera in the world. That takes explaining, and people do make these snap judgments.
I definitely was the victim of this in the beginning and then the benefactor of it in the end. So I would say that, I've seen it go both directions. The reality is that if you're, a small vendor that's going into that, it's one thing. If you start working in an ecosystem, so you're now working in the back end of an event where there's 30 or 40 people or 100 people, or you're working in a large film set, and everyone's going to make decisions about you based on what you bring. And it doesn't mean that you can't bring it. It means that if you're going to take something that is out of the norm, you're going to have to nail it. Like you have to, you're now building, so you can get away with, if you come in and you're doing everything that everybody else does and there's a little glitch, it's one thing. But if you come in with anything that looks at all odd, you have to, and so what I did early on when we were getting things off the ground was we performed. We succeeded all the time, and we made sure that we spent extra time preparing and extra time doing it because we knew that we didn't have the hardware that everybody else had. And the reality is that a lot of that hardware does make a difference. It makes it easier for you to get to things faster. Like I shot a lot of interviews on DSLRs. I would never do that now. Like I would never shoot an interview with a DSLR. Because it doesn't have the tools that I need and it doesn't have the stuff, it doesn't record the right thing, and internally it doesn't, I would never go back to where I was, before to do that because it's not as production ready as a true camera that's built for video, and so there's lots of little weird things that we did in the early days that I wouldn't do now to make that happen. But like, for instance, I had a very large film producer that was going, and we were going to take a video and put it on a big screen. And I know that my Blackmagic cameras are perfectly fine for what we were using it for. Like, you know, I've got 12K black cameras. They will totally do the job. And I still rented an Arri LF. You know, so because that's what he shoots his films on, you know, and so the thing is that, you know, because then he'll look at it and go, oh, okay, I'm okay. Like he, you know, that's the, you know, and we brought, you know, the right lights and the right stuff, and that makes everybody feel like they have more security, that people are just doing the thing, right? And so you have to be conscious to those things, and you should not think that it doesn't matter, because it absolutely matters, you know, to when you're in, you know, a larger production group, and it's not the only thing that matters. It's not like if you can perform it, it's fine, but you always want to look at it as a matter of degrees. Everything that you do that's outside of the straight and narrow, you know, if you're a little late, you're taking a step towards the front of the bus. If you don't dress well, you're taking a step toward the front of the bus. If you don't present yourself well, you're taking a step towards the front of the bus. If you don't use the right equipment, you're taking a step towards the front of the bus. These are all things that not any one of them gets you in front of the bus if something goes wrong. They just get you closer to the front. So what you try to do is, if you ask for things at the event, ask for a cable or something else that you forgot from another crew, another step towards the front of the bus. And so those are the kind of things that you just, because if everything goes well, no one cares. If something goes bad, there's a whole bunch of people that are going to throw somebody under the bus, and you don't want to be that person. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I would say that it matters to myself about what I bring to the party. I would never shoot with an iPhone or any other device like it's not purpose built for what you're using it for. And it also depends on what part of the country. And if you're in Hollywood or Silicon Valley, people are going to be a lot more aware of what is the best of the best. But in the rest of the country, like where I am in Wilmington, Delaware, they don't know, so they don't care.
I will say I've shot video in 40 countries, and people notice everywhere. so I would say, you know, in about 35 states. So it depends on your market and what and the clientele that you have. But in live production, everybody has a pretty good sense of it. They're all paying attention. I mean, I was in Rwanda, and the guy had a QL or a CL5. You know, there, you know, to do it for doing something that you did not need that for. But that was the show of force. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida, asking, seems that the X32 is limited to 8 channels of Dugan automix. Suggestion for a mixer with more than 8 channels of automix. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that the Yamaha either has 16 channels of automix or a lot more. I can't remember which. I know it has at least 16 because we've used it in the past. So the Yamaha, that's a QL1, and all the Yamahas, I believe, will have that Dugan built into it. So I think that is one option for you to look at. If you're renting them, they are a lot more expensive than the Behringers. They're really hard to find right now. I know almost nobody that can find a QL1 at the moment. The other way to go is to get an outboard auto mix. So if you really want to add this, now it still may be pricey. Dugan makes a variety of insert. How Dugan started was actually inserts. So you would have an 8-channel Dugan, and you do inserts out of your mixer back into it, and that's how it originally worked. But he has one that's a 64-channel auto mix. It's a 64-channel auto mix that is just a little box, and it's on Dante. And the funny thing is that the 64-channel Dante is the same price as the 8-channel like analog input, you know, version. So that you can get 64 channels and 8 channels. And I asked Dan, I was like, why are these the same price? And he goes, well, it doesn't cost any more to make. So it was like, that's how you do it. So anyway, and you can break those Dugans into mixes. So what that 64 channel one's really designed is multiple rooms or multiple situations. And so you can actually group them into their own auto mix systems. And so you may want to look at that. It is expensive. It's $5,000 or $6,000, but you can then send all your channels via Dante out of your any mixer, and then move them into Dugan and move them back. So that might be another option as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, what are some techniques for tidying up cable sprawl in the studio? Is it mainly using cables of appropriate length, or are patch panels and cable ties also important?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, if you're using an analog patch panel, then you've got a rat's nest of cable at some point. Maybe in the beginning it'll look nice, but after you've done all your patches and now you got a wall full of wires going willy-nilly. I would go with a digital router system instead of an analog patch panel. And yes, you already suggested having cables of the right length make a lot of sense. And Alex likes to say, cable ties are your enemy until you're prepared to set it in concrete. Then it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I think that stuff's all important. I mean, Alex was articulating earlier exactly why people judge everything you do. And if you have rat's nests of cables, it just looks like you're not paying attention to details. I think I probably own 40 different kinds of cable wrapping products. That wouldn't surprise me. I've never counted them, but everything from Velcro to bongo ties, and each of them have their own place. And the fact that if you're doing something that, even if it's temporary, taking the time to tape down your cables correctly just signals to everybody that you're a detail-oriented person. You understand the safety process of keeping your signal lines and your cables in good shape, and storing them is important to you so that your stuff always works right.
Sorry, I got on the wrong page. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're talking about interconnect cables between different pieces of audio gear or video gear, let's say, get the cables the right length and gather them together if they're never going to be changed or improved. As far as routing, for example, if you've got a modular synth, part of the mystique of a modular synth is all the rat's nest of cables as you're patching all the stuff from one module to the next module, and it's visually necessary to know what's patched into what, because in an analog synth, there's no digital record, and there's no record of what was patched into what or the signal path that they're using. So that being able to see the cables and where they go and using color-coded cables is important in that case. And that's where digital patching, could save you, but, you'd have to save a digital snapshot, and you'd have to do trace routes on how everything is hooked up, or a nodal view in your software to see what nodes are connected to what nodes. And that, of course, eliminates all of the cable problems, but it's not the same mystique,
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, zip ties are your friend as well as Velcro. I live on those two things, and maybe a little gaff tape here and there. But so I took my entire truck this summer and literally pulled everything out, like emptied the rack. And as I was doing it, I was amazed at the pile of cables that were not even plugged into anything when I pulled them out. And I just beat myself up over it, like, this is ridiculous. And it was a cluster mess of just like, oh my gosh, how did this even work? But I will give it to Greg Balat. He spent about 2 weeks with me, and the two of us ran every cable. And you have to have a plan. You just can't just start wiring things together. Like, you need to draw it out on an Excel file first, what goes to where. And then when you are physically wiring things up, you really have to think about what is the best run for this cable. Because if you don't plan that, you will end up in another mess. And you might go through 500 zip ties, but it's worth it. Like, if two wires go in the same direction, I zip tie them. And then if I add one, I cut it, and then I'll add another one. And then you just keep doing that until you get to your, it's never done, because you're going to always change things and always add things. So it's a constant beast. And if you don't take care of it from the get-go and then keep doing that, you'll find a big headache. And to Courtney's thing, you need to label every cable. I mean, even my power cables are labeled. I know it's a power cable, but sometimes I need to know what that power cable is plugged into. So you have to do it on both ends. And even if it's like this long of a cable, still do it, because you're practicing what you're doing. And if you get out of practice and become lazy, you'll get lazy down the road. So I don't know. I've just become really anal with my cables lately, and And when I walk, even my office, when I walk into my office, I actually feel good about it because like it's not this like like I don't know what's happening. But now, I kind of know what's happening.
Yeah, one of the things that I got for a while, for a solid year, I didn't change anything because I just didn't know where the cables were actually going. I had kind of built it organically for office hours in this room, in my room. And now I'm in the habit of every 2 or 3 months, I tear it apart. Like I just take the whole thing apart, put it back together. It means that I know where everything is. I know why I put it there. And usually when I sit down in front of, for me, OmniGraffle, and I just build out a diagram of this is what I want to do next. And then I put it all in. It's actually one of the reasons I'm going back to SDI in my house is because I can build the cables to length, and I can build them exactly the length that I want as opposed to kind of the length that I want, which is what I get with HDMI. And so along with a lot more routing and so on and so forth. So yeah, definitely think through that. Labeling's all good. One of the things that we try to do pretty carefully in the office is that Kevin keeps a kind of an as-built for a lot of the kits, especially ones that go on the road. He'll have an as-built. So if he changes something, he goes into his document and changes like, this is what it is. So we kind of know it's not usually 100% accurate, but it's 95, 98% accurate most of the time of him knowing where all those things are going. It saves a lot of time. Next question.
Next question from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Has anyone on the panel tried the KZ ZSN in-ear monitors? How do they compare to the KZ ZS10s that are often recommended?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I started with these, and then over the course of the time, we ended up with this as my ear, and now I am using those. And obviously, I haven't compared these two, but for the price point of $23 to under $30 each, it's almost worth getting both of them to see what works best for you. So again, we can always, progress and do better. But I would be interested in hearing if you can hear the difference between the two, because these are about a year and a half old and they're very comfortable.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing is the KZ ZS10s, and so I have them. That's what I use in my office for those. I have boxes of them actually, so that I can send them out to people if I need them, like for a show. I ordered one of these based on your question, so I'll let you know. I should have it tomorrow. So we'll try to tomorrow. So maybe later this week or early next week, I'll have them in and I'll tell you if I hear any difference because I've been using. I think I switched over to these. Maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I switched over to these, and I've been really happy with them. When I'm, really doing mission critical on air, I still move back to the Bumblebees because they just have lower profile, but they don't have the same detail that I have with these, and I can really hear everything on the other side as well as on my side. So, they're highly detailed. They're a little, they're not accurate, but they are detailed, and so I can usually hear very, very small issues with sound with them on. Next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. With Microsoft integrating ChatGPT into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, do you think they'll have an option to disable it for educational deployments, given the number of schools that are banning its use?
The schools have to move forward. They're not going to be able to keep on, the papers were dumb in the first place. So it was, so I think that they've been not particularly useful for a very long time, at least since I was in high school. So, I think that it's a matter of, figuring out the next thing that they're going to do, not how do you stop them from using it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. They have to move forward. I mean, you don't see schools requiring you use a slide rule or, long division to calculate your answers. They did
like
at the time.
When the calculator came out, you can't use that. And you can't. Like every time this happens, every time something's made easier, the schools are like, oh my gosh, our entire pipeline is based on the past. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, 1971, I fought the calculator battle against the physics department and the slide rules, and I had to fight tooth and nail to get it. They thought I was an uppity little kid doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the bottom line is that you still have to be accurate. And right now, I mean, I will admit, I'm not entirely certain. As a student, my kids were asking about it, and I was like, I wouldn't use it. And it's not because it's being banned or anything else. It's because it'll sound perfectly normal and be completely inaccurate. So I think that's what the teachers are worried about. But I told, I think that it's great. I think you should use ChatGPT. I told my kids I wouldn't use it because I don't like rereading things or rewriting things. I like to write them from scratch. But I think that forcing a kid to make something in ChatGPT and then not be wrong, like actually have to reread it, might cause them to do more study than they would if they had just written the paper from the ground up. Because it's much harder to suss out what's wrong in something that is written reasonably than it is to get it some other way. So it actually makes, in my opinion, the students work harder, to do this. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, concerning the accuracy of ChatGPT, but you have to realize that humans, if the student was not allowed to use an artificial intelligence, a student may only draw on one or two sources for his information to write his paper. And he may be watching the wrong cable news channel or the wrong Facebook feed to pull his information from, which is full of incorrect information. And the reason ChatGPT occasionally will get things wrong is because it's pulling its sources from all those things that are out there on the internet, and the internet is full of a lot of wrong opinions and wrong information out there, and it weighs those things. And I think it has to take into account, as they train those models even better, to have a consensus, to have trusted models and trusted sources that it gives more weight to, so it can weight its answers and pull its information from the more trusted sources. But a human has to do the same thing, and he has to figure out whether he trusts the sources that he's using for, writing his paper as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I think unequivocally they should allow it, and I think they should also allow the teachers to have their own ChatGPT that actually checks those papers for accuracy.
Dueling ChatGPTs. Yeah, I mean, I would rather. I guess overall I would rather kids over time to get good at using AI than to try to figure out how to learn. I use it all the time. All the recipes that I use for my soups are all ChatGPT. It's been like this experiment. Now I slowly change them and move them around and everything else, but I start with, give me this kind of soup. I had to give me an osh soup, and I just finished some last night. I'll have some for lunch today. And I had, before that, it was it's rainy day soup, and before that, I have a lemongrass soup, and all these soups that I like to make are all done with ChatGPT. And I don't necessarily. I realized that it wasn't any worse because it was compiling all of these recipes into something that was there. It wasn't a specific one. Anyway, I think that the thing is that part of the problem is that we're really stuck teaching kids stuff that they don't need to know, and then we're not teaching them what they need to know. So I think that's the real problem here, is that schools are going to be changing a lot. I don't even know what it'll look like in 10 years, but they're basically, they made sense before the internet. They don't make sense right now. And we're not, again, I think that No Child Left Behind, and this is probably a Saturday discussion, but No Child Left Behind kind of destroyed the schools. And I don't know if they can recover, because it made us pay attention to packing information into people's heads that they can Google, and ignoring the things that actually bring, knowledge and skill to their life, and enjoyment, and so I think that it was probably, well, when we look back and wonder why we don't have public schools anymore, we'll be able to draw it right back to No Child Left Behind, and Common Core, like that. Those are the two things that will draw it back to this. These were the fatal mistakes that the school system made, and it's what it destroyed it. All right, there's my little tirade for you for today. Anyway, I spent 20 years tracking it, just watching it and thinking about it, and working with schools at every level. And so that's my opinion after a while. So we're going to look at graphics. I'm going to change our subject here. We started a little late because there wasn't a lot of questions, and I know that we'll kind of scan through the stuff. So as you see it, if you see questions, we're going to. I have to skip through it. I had a couple problems getting ready for this. Number one is I couldn't capture from the screen, so it took me a little while to get all of my pipeline reset up to record it. And I know that I'm saying my dog ate my homework. I have a bunch of video to show you, and Final Cut won't start up when you have a lot of isotope audio plugins. It just gets halfway through and just freezes. So I was like, and then it was just one of those things, like I tried a little too long to get, because Final Cut's a lot faster than Resolve for this kind of thing. Like, I want to compile a bunch of stuff and put it all in. I just kept on trying to get Final Cut to start, and I couldn't get into Final Cut. I got into Resolve, but I didn't have time then to cut the show. So we're just going to skip through the quick times that I had there. So let me, let's see here. Let's jump to, you probably just see my screen here, which is fine. Let me, let's see here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look at a couple of these, and we'll just talk through them and discuss, what we're looking at. One of the reasons that I do this all the time. So I collect this kind of stuff and throw it in, not usually just all the playoffs, but I will collect graphics that I like. If I watch a show, I will record the show and pull out the graphics, and I usually have little folders of it. And the reason is I do it relatively often. And really half the reason I watch TV is just to watch the lower thirds and the graphics and the things, and I pay a lot of attention to them because when you get asked to do it, you want to know what the modern version of this is. Like, you don't want to do, like, it's really easy to do something old that looks old, and you have to remember that a lot of people are watching the modern versions. And so you want to pay attention to those. And the reason I pay attention to the NFL in, like, the Steelers aren't playing, so I don't really care who wins anymore. But for me, I watch them because this is where probably the most amount of money in the world is spent on graphics. There's the American football graphics, the Super Bowl, and the Olympics. And that's where you get to see where all the money goes when someone has all the money to put into into live graphics. And so that's why I feel like it's worth us looking at every once in a while to take a look at it, and about once a year just say, well, where are they? And I think that so that's why we're looking at this. And let me hold on a second here. Oh, there we go. So let's take a look at. I just had one fail to open. Anyway, so and I will go to. So let's see here if I cut to this. There we go. So this is this is NBC, and I will flat out say that I think the NBC ones are the best. like when we look at them, that's the one I pay the most attention to, is because they generally are the best, in my opinion, the best designed ones of the bunch. So what I find interesting is how much information is being drawn into this. And for the panelists, just jump in, or you can raise your hand or whatever if there's things you want to add. So there's all these things that we're, being told, and it's an amazing amount of information carefully told to us. So we have the time remaining, on the clock. Let me do something real quick here. Okay. We have the time remaining on the clock here. We have obviously the time in the half. We have what quarter time in the quarter, and the quarter there. Of course, we have the scores, and we have these nice, we have these things, and this is a lot of design. Like, when you look at something like this, if you want to get good at computer graphics, you try reproducing it. This is how I got into doing how I got into doing live graphics for a couple different networks, was taking network graphics and trying to reproduce them pixel for pixel. Like, how do I make it do exactly what it's doing at that moment, and reproduce that? Because every time I compare it, mine would look schlocky, and then I'd have to figure out why does this still look schlocky? Like, what makes mine look not good and theirs look good? And as I closed that gap, I got to a point where I could see most of those things and do it. So there's little things like these little arrows are all adding to which direction they're going. You have the logo here. You have who's got the ball. A lot of these things, at first we thought that, you'll see other opinions about this in some of the other broadcasts, but there is a little bit of directionality here. So there's a slight gradient. But it looks more like a kind of like a reflection. You can see right here that's kind of capturing that reflection. You've got this little corner thing, and there's things that will pop out here. Well, hopefully we'll be able to find those for you. But these are a little like semi-transparent edges, and you just want to look at all the attention, like little things like there's a catch edge right here. So there's this catch edge that gives it that dimension, as well as just a subtle little shadow underneath it. as well as the highlight up here. And so that's what's giving it the dimension that you feel, when you look at it. And so let's see if we can, let's see, I'm not sure if it'll, and here's your, I really like this transition. This is a new one, I think, this year. So if you watch this going, so this is this is your alpha. You can see it coming in. So this is your sweeper that you have here, or a stinger. And so notice how they have the lines. And so what they probably did here is there's probably a lined version of this that's there. But you can see it looks like to me that they have a lined version. They obviously have the solid version, and they're taking a holdout mat and moving it through both of them. So it's a holdout mat that passes through them, and then it fills. And this is I really find this to be a nice touch. You see these, it took that front edge that was floating in front. They ran the blue across it while it was going forward, and then they got rid of everything else and just left a little, like those are like little things at the very end. And that, that I feel like that adds a lot of,
the sound effect is good too on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, this has gotten a lot better in the recent years. The Telestrator stuff. See, I can do Telestrator on top of his Telestrator. For a long time, the Telestrator was pretty rough. In those.
And
areas.
how many physical frames is that? Because the perception
for that sweeper,
six frames.
Let's see here.
Because again, frames are portions of seconds, and that we're perceiving all of that information in less than
Totally. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
So in under a second.
33, 34, 30. So it's about a second. That and all of that happened. And again, you want to look at this, that all of that happened in 1 second, all of that. And I think about how many meetings that was. For that 1 second, there's a lot of meetings there.
Because you're messing with a brand image, you're definitely
and then just there's going to be a lot of people that have opinions about what that looks like. So watch this transition. It's really nice. So you see this wipe out. That's not by accident. So you see how they're using that. So it's a lot. There's a lot going on. We could probably spend the whole time just working on this one, but watch this. It bumps. See the center? It bumps a little bit, and then it fades out, but then it lets little pieces come back out again. Then you can see it's doing a reveal of the back logo, and then it brings that Mac logo up. And then it brings the touchdown forward. I don't really like the text on the touchdown, but that's a whole other story. I don't like things that feel like they're kind of hard embossed. But you can see like the other thing they're doing here is you can see they've got the little like flickering light thing going on there. That's there. They got rid of the logo there with you can see how they get rid of that logo. That is a lot of work, and this is, again, like as Sky said, this is like a second. That's a lot of work in there to make that all kind of, you're fading that back and forth, and then you're holding it back there again. It comes back. There's a lot of things that they're doing where it stops and comes back.
There's your little glint on the right corner over there.
Yeah, and then you can see, you want to watch how this stuff emerges. So all that stuff is coming out. It's not only fading up, but it's just sliding a little bit as well as everything pops in. So everything kind of assembles itself, for you. And then they go back to the old like little ticker. And there's a couple of different ways of doing this, but they go back to that little ticker that you see there to give you the new one, to give you a little bit of
rolling numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. The rolling number thing is a harken back to the old scoreboards. And then it should here, let's see here. thoughts.
But what I'm appreciating
and
is
let's go back and watch it.
Is that there's consistency for me as the audience. I'm not having to reinterpret where that information is or how it's placed, but they've repurposed it because they have other information they need to tell you in that moment.
And all of that happened in just a couple seconds there. And then that's your sweeper again. Same one. Now this is, I just want to point out how hard this is. What you see here, it's something you see over and over and over again. Okay, so they showed a play. They had a little bit more time because they had the celebration and they went back to it. But then they came back to this play. They actually have a picture of the player. They figured out where the player is, gave him an arrow, and now they're doing telestration over top of that. And that all happened in, less than a minute. That they got to that frame, they set that frame up, they put it together, they put all that in, and then they do that over and over and over again throughout the show. And that is not a minor success. Let's go to the questions.
First question from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, and asking, have you ever examined the graphics and effects used in the World Cup of football? Often they debut new graphic technologies in their stingers.
I have not, to be honest with you. And I think that we probably should cover the World Cup, football, do look at FIFA. It's not something that I was conscious to, mostly because I didn't watch any of it. I don't. There's a lot of wide shots, in soccer, and I have a hard time. As an American football person, I have a hard time watching soccer for very long. I know that it's a really big sport, and a lot of people like it. I just don't. I'm not as conscious to it, and I should look at what they're doing there.
And it's on a picnic cloth. That's all I can say.
So it's. I don't want to. I get that it's an important sport, and a lot of people are into it, and I think that I understand it more now that than I used to. I think the offsides and penalties were confusing for me, but the big thing is lots of wide shots, and I have a hard time with that. So I haven't looked at it as much, but I would like to. I think we should definitely break it down. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana, asking, the XFL looks more modern graphics-wise than the NFL. Is it just an intentional separation or less entrenched dogma?
Go ahead, Sky.
My anticipation is that they're aiming at a younger audience, and so they're using the video game concept and not unafraid of being able to, like you said, break old traditional ways because they're going for a younger audience. So that would be my guess of why it's got a different look.
Yeah, I haven't. I think that the market, the size of the market that is watching an XFL is much different than the NFL. So they are a little bit more edgy. They probably have a little more room to do it, and they probably also have less layers of approval, for what they're doing. Next question.
Next question in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton. Any comment on on-field graphics and on-ice graphics in hockey?
Yeah, we should look at the on. I don't know about the on-ice. I can't comment on those because we don't have those graphics lined up here, but we can definitely jump to, some of the, on-field graphics. Let me see if I can find some of these. A lot of us have watched these on-field graphics evolve over a lot of time. And let's see if I can. What I'm kind of amazed by is if you look at this and you watch this here, that they're moving that camera, the camera's bouncing around, and you really just don't see any slippage. Now, you will see slippage occasionally. So I think if we go back to where they were lined up here. Now, watch the second and goal that's in there. You'll notice that it slides just a little bit. You can see it. Can you see it bounce a little bit? There's just a little bit of bounce in it as it, didn't quite stay where it needed to be, but that's really hard. Like, it's doing it live. We're moving the camera. It's bouncing around. So it is, the on-screen graphics are kind of an amazing thing. Figuring that out. Now, what they do to do that, my understanding of what they do is they have to calibrate those cameras. They have to know where the plane of the field is so that it can only exist in that plane. Then there's a variety of keying that is required to make that actually work. And they have to, really figure out what that key needs to look like to go over the right things and not go over the players. And you will know players with certain shoe colors will not, will kind of blend into the background a little bit. But it's come a long way. I mean, they've been doing that now for 30 years. I remember them showing it to us at Prime Sports Network, like this is going to be the future and everything else. And when we saw it, we were like, is it? Is it going to be the future? Because it looks really ugly right now. And it did look ugly until only probably the last 10 years. It's really gotten to a point where it kind of almost feels like it's part of the field. So it's a pretty, pretty interesting piece there. Yeah, let's go to the next question. Go ahead, Sky. You were going to say something.
Yeah, just real quick. You're talking about the progression of the graphics. I do remember the anecdote about the original tracking the hockey puck, and they didn't let the line fade away, and so it just looked like somebody's small child had taken a crayon to the screen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I worked a couple seasons with the MLS, and I was working as a technician in the VAR, which is the video assistant referee booth. And we got there 6 hours before a game, and we would have to calculate each camera would go to a position on the field. We would take a frame of it, and then the computer would do its thing. And what we did was we were able to put, I know this is a soccer thing, but it's still a sport. We'd put a line across for the offside. And so, but it was just so cool. I mean, I'm in the field, and I got to see that happen, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I just want to outline that I think that soccer is probably the future of the two things that I expect to grow really, really large in the next little bit of time is soccer and esports. Like those are the two probably fastest growing sports that we're going to see, competitive sports in the United States, because I think that Apple will help a lot with the MLS getting a much more exposure, and I think it'll change a lot. And a lot of people don't want it. Like my son is definitely growing into what could be a lineman. And I don't have any interest in having him play.
I think Ted Lasso is helping a lot for that too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good, Courtney.
Well, it's just a question for Doug, since he worked in that booth, if in the past, the on-field graphics, which are the graphics that are stuck to the field, so they used to have to do those with specially calibrated cameras with encoders built on onto the heads and the zoom lenses and the dollies if they're moving cameras, so that they would know where each camera is in space, so they could keep it locked to the image that camera is delivering. Are they doing that now, all with the computer using just the visual input from that camera lens? Without optical encoders, it's all happening in a computer.
I think
somewhere.
It's software that runs in their system. The company is Hawkeye, and they started in the tennis world when they would do the replays to see if the ball was in or out. You'd see the animation of the ball hit the line or not hit the line. That's where the company started over in Europe, and then they transitioned or added to the soccer offside, but I think they work with the NFL as well. I mean, I think Hawkeye that technology is being used all over in sports. Right. But in about any sport nowadays can use this technology. I mean, you watch a baseball game and you see the pitch and you see a logo on the side. Well, that logo is a graphic. It's not, and sometimes you actually see them on the mound, the pitcher's mound. So this technology is just going to get better and better, where you won't be able to tell it's a graphic or if it's real.
Here's another shot here. I'm going to cut to it here. So we'll have, so you want to pay attention to, a lot of the sweepers. I love reproduce. That was one of the first things I did was reproduce sweepers, and I pay a lot of attention to them, or stingers, or however you want to call it. So what you're seeing here is a wipe, or change in probably not a wipe, but it's a change in slowly fading in elements. And the thing you want to pay attention, the little things. I mean, obviously there's the wipe; it's wiping across, but look at the organic movement of the lines and how they, they're basically, kind of building up. A kind of an overexposure and then fading out, and you can see that kind of build up there, And then also look at the NBC logo and how it's look at how there's like a playfulness to it, the things bouncing. So when they bounce up, they kind of bounce, and they kind of have a little stretchiness to them to make that actually happen. And then they get wiped out here. And you'll see that you'll see, and I don't know if it actually wiped that way or whether that's it could be a compression issue too, because that's a really weird wipe.
That looks like a mistake.
Yeah, it looks like a mistake there. It doesn't look like it's a mistake. I mean, it looks like they did it though. That doesn't look like it maybe should have been there. Anyway, so and you'll see little things like that, little glitches here and there, and I think that actually might be a rendering glitch right there. Anyway, and then it pops off. So this is a super source that they're using for this. This is the next gen AWS is. I think they do this in a lot of things. The thing to look at is also like I like to look when I look at super sources. I look at a lot of the backgrounds, that are there. So if we look at this one kind of play, all they're doing is they've got a bunch of triangles that are all 3D triangles that are all kind of flowing back and forth. Probably some kind of and there's a rendering error right there. So you watch this. I think. Hold on. It's not a rendering error. It's just the two that see those two in the upper right kind of do this weird thing where they stick together there, and then it's just that they're passing by. So it just looks. It's like I would have done something different there. See how that highlight just goes that it suddenly just it catches your eye. So anyway, but it looks really nice, and it doesn't distract you from the foreground, in there. It's just kind of, and that's what you want to do is this kind of slow moving. That's probably on the outer edge of the speed at which you want to go. Also notice that, this stuff is in some focus and it fades out. So that gives you that dimensionality of it being, the focus is really right here with with it fading out in distance in the 3D. I'm not a big fan of making the edges look rough, here, like the rough highlight thing. Feels like they're trying too hard. They do that in a couple of different places, and I feel like that. And then there's even graphics inside of the graphics. So you have the 3D tracked ones that are there, and you can see it, semi-tracked. Now this is all pre-recorded.
That's a full AWS commercial, and it's playing simultaneously with the playback. I'm wondering if AWS. Do they charge less if they have to share screen time?
No, they actually charge more for that. Wow. And the reason for that is because the chances of someone watching it is much higher than if it was in a commercial break. So, it's actually now you'll notice here.
Embedded.
So notice this. This is we're not animating the. In this case, just a little note here. We're not. This is a DVE animation. It's not an animation of the super source. And you know that because see how suddenly they just go, and we're done. So see how this 2D plate, the 2D video animates over it just closes it up. It happens really quickly, but people like me will notice like, oh, they did a DVE there. They didn't animate this up to make it because that's a lot harder. Like if they did it, if these edges animated up with this, people like me would go like, whoa, they're not messing around now, but that's a DVE animation there. Let's go to the next question. Oh, go Mitchell. Did you want to say something before we go to the next question?
Just an observation. I don't watch a lot of sports, but what's interesting about what you're showing us here, Alex, is that the combination of different things that are playing together, very nice to create a very rich presentation. 3D graphics by themselves are very static. They don't feel right. They're unworldly. But when you start adding optical shadings and colorations and particle systems, all of a sudden they just take on a whole new life. And I'm very interested in how they're taking basic 3D stuff and layering on these things, like where they're drawing the outline or they're adding some sparkles to do it. That's very, very sophisticated.
And when you look at these graphics, what you're seeing is millions and millions and millions of dollars being spent on these, like maybe $5 or $10 million being spent on a look, maybe more. Like it is like, because you have to remember that a football, if you count all the salaries of the players that are on the ground, every football game is like a $50 million operation. Like every game is expensive. The same thing with soccer or football. Is that when you count the salaries, everyone's spending a lot of money on this, and so it is worth paying attention to it, because you really get to see what happens when you have, art directors that really are paying attention to all these details. You may not agree with all their decisions, but it's a big investment and it's worth learning from. We always want to learn from folks that have more money than us. Because what I did learn is, as an individual computer graphics artist using After Effects and Electric Image and Form Z, I could build something that looked almost identical. And as I did that, as I copied it, like ChatGPT or like Midjourney, but as I copied it like pixel for pixel, it improved my ability to see it. It improved my ability to do the next one. When someone came to me, all these little tricks that I had figured out by copying it were stuff that I added to other people's graphics, and I didn't necessarily do it verbatim, but I went that little flurry or something like pumping a little bit before it pops open. I learned how to do that. Now it's not something that I got to figure out when I'm getting paid to do it. I'm just like, oh, I know the keyframes to make that actually work. Next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. What software would be useful to learn to develop one's real-time graphic skills? Would Blender and Unreal Engine be a solid start?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
To reproduce what we're seeing here, I don't think most of the people in the industry would be using Blender. I think they're using purpose-built stuff for sporting events. But the observation I want to make based on your question here, Douglas, is that if I were to approach trying to do something myself, and I have no experience doing it for sporting events, I generally have a client say, I want something that looks like that on a sporting event. And then I would recreate it. And I would recreate it using After Effects for the layers and compositing, Cinema 4D for the 3D effects, and maybe some particle effects just to add something. Because those seems to be the three main things here I'm seeing over and over again. Unreal Engine, that's a whole different ball game, and I would add on at a different layer at a different point. But for these graphics, I think Cinema 4D, After Effects, and maybe some particle system.
I think there's another question about that next. Doug?
Yeah, this question does kind of relate to the next question, but just like what Alex said, I've literally been watching a game. We'll hit pause, go up to the screen with my camera, take a picture of it, email it to myself, and then go try to recreate it. Drives my wife crazy when I pause TV, but it's just Photoshop is what I use the most. It's just and building, like how to build, all that score bug for NBC, like Alex says, like there's so much in that. It takes forever to figure that stuff out, but once you do and you get the hang of it, like if you are into these type of graphics and things, like I do that all the time. If something looks cool, I will go and grab it and recreate it.
And it really is, if you're trying to get into the industry, copying things that you see is a really useful way, because you think that you understand, oh, I know how to do that. I would do it in After Effects, or I would go into Blender and do whatever. Okay, do it. Do it. Like, and then you'll have a whole different respect for the graphics that you're looking at as well, because, I thought things looked really simple until I actually tried to reproduce them. And I was like, okay, that's really hard. Go ahead, Courtney.
I wondered if you'd tried using Midjourney to create lower third graphics.
I haven't
for sports, and see what it would come up with, because it has all that stuff scraped in there, and I wondered, if it could come up with something creative.
Just with all the text would be all garbly-cooked. Like it would be.
Well, you can replace that.
Yeah,
that on a separate layer or something.
Yeah, absolutely. You could do lower thirds in the style of Rembrandt and just get some. Or steampunk lower thirds in the style of Rembrandt or something like that. Could be a lot of fun. So the and the thing to notice though is that most of it isn't very complicated. It's just really well done. That's the thing, is that most graphics that you see in live graphics are simply just exceptionally executed. Unreal Engine right now, we'll show some stuff I think a little bit later that might incorporate some Unreal Engine. The biggest problem that I have with Unreal Engine right now is that it doesn't anti-alias very well. So you end up with, when you see it in like the quote unquote AR graphics that you see there, which I will show before the end of the hour, it oftentimes you see a little bit of sizzling along the edges. This is one of those red pill things. I apologize. I just told you this because you're going to notice it in a bunch as we go forward. But you'll see on the edges, you'll see like the little aliasing, like a little bit of sizzling, like a little moving down it. And that's because it's not oversampling enough to get rid of the aliasing that goes on those edges. And it's getting better and better and better, but that's still been a problem with real-time graphics and Unreal. We went down the path of thinking I was going to build an engine that was going to do Unreal all the time. I couldn't get rid of that cost effectively, and so we stopped using Unreal for real-time stuff, for our graphics, because we couldn't solve the anti-aliasing problem. Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'm also a user of templates, and because I will take bits and pieces of these templates that you can buy that are often used initially in After Effects, but now Motion has a lot of them built in there. And again, you can just use whatever you want if you're that they've already given you. But what's fun is you can deconstruct them and use the bits and pieces, and also learn from somebody that's done some of that, as you say, that animation of the little stretchy little squiggly thing of animation.
Well, and I think that the interesting thing there is that, especially the interaction with Motion and Final Cut, is that you can go in, you can build a motion. This is what Alex Goldner has shown us in labs in the past. Is you can go in there and build a very careful animation, all the little moves and all the little things you want, and then export that basically as just a title inside of Final Cut. You open it up, and the editor only has to just change the words, and it'll do all the pretty things that it needed to do. And that's how these graphics are working too. I think that they're either Chiron or VizRT are the two big ones that I see the most in these kind of broadcast graphics, and for the lower third areas, and then for the other areas, it can be a lot of different things, as you go through it. But I think that those are the two big ones, and those are all pre-built. So these are all those graphics you see are they're talking to a database or talking to live information and inserting those in real time as they go through and build those behaviors. I know that a friend of mine used to work on the Fox Sports graphics, and when Fox Sports hit the new graphics, when Fox Sports did their new graphics, that was when we suddenly saw real design. And this was probably in the aughts, in the 2002, 3, 4, Fox Sports wanted to make a big splash, and they got in and they started doing these really high-end graphics. And a friend of mine, I might try to bring him on. Corey, it'd be fun to bring on. So worked on those, and those were all done in VizRT. And what's interesting is they went from, as I remember it, he had, they built it all in VizRT, and then ESPN wanted to just rent them. They just want, or Fox, and then ESPN and others wanted to rent the VizRT. And before he knew it, he was making as much money renting VizRT with operators. I think they had like 20 some or more VizRT units to use in there. But what VizRT allowed them to do is have all these 3D graphics, have it all driven dynamically, and they were really the first ones to do a lot of that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'd like to see us bring Chris Sabato in, who's a friend of After Hours, and show what he does. He's one guy, and he runs these sports programs that have graphics that maybe they're not exactly as good at this stuff, but they're darn close, and it's all back. He's written all the programs that talks to the scoreboard, that talks to the databases.
Yeah, absolutely.
He really does have quite a nice setup in the way he's done it, and it's very interesting because he's not using high-end products to make that happen. He's using off-the-shelf stuff.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have folks that are kind of figuring this stuff out on the show in the not too distant future. So we're looking at that for some of these Tuesdays. Let's go to the next question.
Eduardo Augustine from Panama. Which tools can we use to get started with these type of graphics?
Go ahead, Doug.
Well, I'll just do a little brief history of my start in this. When I started to really take on like sports graphics, Jeff Keithley, I think many of you know him, he turned me on to a software called CharacterWorks. And it's it's an affordable way to get into really doing sports graphics. And in sports, it's not just the game. I mean, we're storytellers in sports. So there's a story to be told, and a lot of that happens through the graphics. So I love graphics, and I pay a lot of attention to the detail of what they're doing, and then I recreate things. But using that CharacterWorks, like I would start in Photoshop and build the elements, and then I would import them into CharacterWorks, and then I would build the animations of the boxes coming in and the words fading up or doing whatever moves I do. And to Sky's earlier point, templates are a really good way to go into things, because I buy templates all the time, but I've never used one just out of the gate. I've always had to change something in it. So you got to dig deep into what, how was it built? And then, reverse engineer, like, okay, that did this layer's on top of that, this moves in here, and so, and then now I have gotten to the level where CharacterWorks is, even though it's a really, really powerful program and can be data driven, and I got a box that talks to a box and brings the data in. But right back here, I have a 4RU expression, because when you're going up to the next level, and I work with some schools, some colleges, that ESPN gives you the graphics package. Like, here, you will use our package for this show. And all you got to do is just change the players' names, the coaches' names, or feed it a different spreadsheet. But for me to do that, I had to buy an expression, which, you're talking $2,500 for CharacterWorks, $40,000 for expression. Although I found my expression used and cheap, and I really got a good deal on my expression. And really, to be straight up, this 4RU unit back here, even though it has the pretty logo on it, and I don't use that computer. I have a much powerful computer in my truck, and all I need is the little dongle. That's the license key. So I open the software up with that. But and two, like, reach out to people. I'm actually figuring out transitioning some of my old clients' graphics from CharacterWorks to Expression, and I'm a newbie right now. So and today I'm trying to get the data to work with a Google Sheet with the Expression, and it's just a process. But like we all do in any part of this media thing, you're constantly learning, and that's what's fun about this industry. It's like, once you figure out something, like, oh, guess what? Something more cool is coming, and I got to learn some AI, whatever, this and that. But I love it. So
go ahead, Mitch, real quick.
I'm a Adobe fanboy, as you folks know, and I've been using Adobe After Effects since it was COSA. That's a long time. And what's interesting about it is that the program has evolved along with me to allow 3D lighting, things that we come to expect from high-end 3D programs. So what I've used moving forward, and I recommend it as a good starting point, is that there are easy ways to cheat your 3D graphics using a thing called Element 3D by bringing in outside OBJ files and animating them and moving them and lighting them. It's a good starting point to get. And then when you get good enough, Cinema 4D will work fine with After Effects. And then there are particular particle animation. You can do pretty much everything you just saw if you have the time and the inclination.
Yeah, so the dynamic part is the hardest part, if you're doing those things. So there's a couple stair steps that you want to kind of think about. One is the first thing that you want to think about is just doing great stills. So great still animate. This is the good ball handling skills. Build nicely designed 2D graphics that just look really pretty, and you fade them on, fade them off. You can DVE them on, like have them swing in, swing out. Those are all things that are, just Photoshop or Affinity. I actually use, for most of my 2D graphics that are stills, I use Affinity Photo. And Affinity Photo, the whole suite right now, I think until for the next day or two, is like $99. And it's like Designer and Photo and all these other things. And so, but I paid, I don't know, $25, $30 for it. And I just use that. And mostly because I still have Photoshop, but I keep on wanting to not pay for that subscription. so I sit there and I try to do it in Affinity, and I've been using Photoshop since 1991. So for over 30 years now. And so if I need to, I just go into it and fix it and then go back. But I'm always, and then I send angry things to Affinity. Like, I couldn't do it because of the, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so that's what I use there. Building good stills and you still look at all these graphics, and even if they're moving and you're not moving, you can build a nice still that looks amazing, and your clients are going to think it's great. Just to fade it in, fade it out. You can load it into your ATEM. You can load it into any graphic that you want with an alpha channel, with a TGA or ping or whatever. TGA for Blackmagic, not pings if you can avoid it because it has curve edge issues. The next step, how I got started, is going from those stills to the next thing. I actually was using Keynote. So Keynote will play out, and I would play that out to play my little animations out of Keynote, and I literally had a green background, and I would put the little graphics on, and we had ones for Salesforce that were like all animated and everything else. So they were all built, and whatever they were built, they're delivered to us. Drop them over with an alpha channel over top of it in Keynote. And we would hit play on Keynote, and those little things would animate out. Now, we had in the Panasonic 450, we had a Primat keyer, so we could get really detailed keys out of it to make that work. The problem you get into is you get a little bit of aliasing because it's 422 going in. So, but Keynote, we did a lot of stuff with just Luma keys in Keynote. I could probably get pretty close to the look, quote unquote, look that you're seeing, here. When I show this, I could probably get that bottom one. I could probably get most of those things to work in Keynote. Like with a little bit of work, I could do it. But I did a solid 2 or 3 years of production with Keynote on a Luma key. And I just knew I knew what I could do. And this gets back to what we were talking about earlier in the first hour of, if you do it, you better get it right, because people will be like, that's weird. And so, but we definitely did it. It definitely worked. There are limitations of when you can play it back and how you play it back and everything else. But now we're still talking about an investment, being able to do a lot of graphics with an investment of like $30. Keynote's free. And what I'm talking about with like having something to edit the video. So those are the things that you can start with. And then I would, especially looking at cost effectiveness, Motion is $50. It's the best ROI on any investment of any piece of software I've ever seen. It's $50 for Motion. It's got 3D text. It's got all kinds of other things. You can build them. Now, all of those are still going to render out. You need to render them out. And then you need to figure out how you're going to play them back into your system. And you need to figure out how you're going to key it. So those are all still part of that little world. As you move forward, a lot of stuff's done in After Effects. So that's another, that's definitely a mainstay, in that area. Then you start to, you have on the air, there's a CG character design system that we use from Softron that does lower thirds and loads it up. Remember that SPX is free. So what we use, the graphics, the lower thirds that we use here, if you want to start designing those, and those can be dynamic, they can be animated, they can be in Tuomo, who is in our community. So if you have questions, we should really do another lab on SPX, with Tuomo. But those are free. Like you can literally do that. And if you get a PC, you can run Casper, and that's what we do. We key fill out. So that's a free graphic system, and Casper was designed that way so that I think by the Swedish government or whatever to make it open source so that they could build I believe that's the case. Tuomo may correct me. But so that's a free system, and all you need is the hardware to play that stuff out. And we're grabbing all the names, we're grabbing all those things that we need dynamically. We can make them a lot more complicated. We choose to go simple, but Tuomo can make them very complicated. If you looked at the rocket launch, that rocket launch, all those graphics were coming out of SPX, which again is a free one. Now, what you have to pay for is if you need Tuomo to build something for you, you pay him for that. But you want to, I think that those would be great places to get started, and you could do a lot of damage without spending. Like I've just sunk you for $100, in time to make that actually work. Maybe the hardware to do the playouts, and so. So that's where you can get started there. The bigger games, of course, are almost all the 3D graphics that you see get started in Cinema 4D. Like that's what's being used right now for most 3D graphics for broadcast. That's kind of the standard. There are some people playing with Blender, but I haven't seen any graphics that actually made it to air. Now there may be, I'm sure there are. I just haven't seen them. so that's all. So a lot of them start there as far as how they're generated. Some of the higher end generation for some of the big systems like VizRT, I think there is some stuff that's tied into Maya to make that actually work. So those are some of the 3D systems. Of course, Expressions is a very popular one. It's considered actually cost effective. I know Doug said it's $45,000, but that's where these systems start. I think the VizRTs start at like 80,000 or something like that.
Yeah, they're about 80.
Yeah, so those get, things get real expensive real quick, in those areas. But there are, a bunch of great ones. And again, I think that Unity and Unreal, especially Unreal right now, will probably come up and really create a lot of great opportunities. It's just the real-time rendering stuff isn't working great, in my opinion, like as far as it's the aliasing problem that's there. Let's go to the next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, how would they create the subtle 3D effects in the MBC lower third? Would that be done with careful modeling in Unreal Engine or similar?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Very likely After Effects. An Unreal Engine would be too big a tool to apply to something like this.
I'd be surprised if After Effects is used in any of the graphics that we're seeing here today, because it's real time, and so it probably wouldn't be used at all. These are all dynamic moves, and so these are all built into the Chiron, or into the system, so that they're all those movements and everything else are all dynamic, and they're all set up as elements. That's my understanding anyway. But those are all set up as individual elements, and so all of it's running in a real time system. So if you're doing stuff for post that you're going to put that in, then a lot of that stuff makes sense. But in general, when you see that. When you see those graphics, all of these graphics are being created by a real-time engine. Next question.
Next question from John Tenhouse in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Are the graphics edited on the fly, like with Adobe After Effects NDI setup, or is there a completely different system that is being used?
Go ahead, Doug.
It depends on what graphics you're playing out. Most graphics are already pre-built. But like I was mentioning, the ESPN package that they send us, they're templates, and you just change the text that's on top of them, and then all the moves and animations are already built the way that those words can just be animated in. But yeah, most graphics are pre-built and then played out. And in a caveat to that there are two types of graphic people in this world as well. There are the creators, the ones that actually create those templates. But then a lot of the times on these TV trucks, you are just playing out graphics. In fact, the reason I had a day off today, I was supposed to be running expression graphics for a G League basketball game, but the away team travel problems and the game got canceled. So a lot of the times you're just a play out person. You're not actually creating the graphics. You just call them up when the director calls for a graphic.
Yeah. And I will say that a lot of the design work oftentimes happens in After Effects because their designers are After Effects users. And so that what it's going to look like oftentimes gets sourced in After Effects, but none of that actually makes it to it's really fast for them to figure out what they want, and then they hand it off, and then it gets broken up. Because what you want to do is you want to try to get through the design process as lightly as possible and then move into that. Let's go. And I'm going to show you one more thing here before we go to the top of the hour. We'll try to answer a couple questions. I know we started late, so we'll go a little late. Now let's see here. So this is the halftime highlights here. Lots of graphics there. This is a helicopter shot typically. So this is some of the real-time stuff, and actually this looks pretty good as far as. But one of the things you'll notice is this is a hard thing to do, and they're doing it in real time with a real camera. And a couple things that you'll notice that the tracking isn't perfect. So you'll see now this is a hard thing to do. So I'm going to be fair in that area. But it is there. Now I believe these are going to be 3D characters. I don't know why. I guess the Cowboys have a horse. The only thing I will say is that the level of detail on these guys and the horse and the ship, these look like they were bought out of Turbo Squid, and no one actually worked on the lighting at all. Like they just look like we bought them on Turbo Squid and threw them in there, and maybe we changed the sails, the texture on the sails. I feel like that didn't turn out too well.
Describe Turbo Squid real quick.
Oh, Turbo Squid is where we buy a lot of it's like iStock photo for 3D models, and so Turbo Squid is where we buy a lot of models. But I bet you we could probably find these models on Turbo Squid, because they look so bad. Anyway, so but this is tracking this in. This is a real-time graphic. I don't know what they're using, in this case. for this, but it is an interesting thing. The other thing I will say, and I'll try to find it I will say that while I like the MVC graphics, I think this background shot looks better. I'm not certain, but I think that this is a green screen. So I think they're in front of green screen and they have this background here. And one of the reasons I think this is because when we look at the NBC one has all kinds of aliasing and array, and this one doesn't. So one of the things you'll notice here is these guys are talking, and if you look at the motion blur in his hand, see how it's a little chopped off? I think that this is green. So I think
you're right, Alex. And also look at the color of their hair. They're getting spill in there.
Yeah, so I think this is green screen. They're standing probably right in front of a green screen, and then they put the graphic behind it. I will say that I prefer that. Let me see if I can find. I had some error with that one. There's a shot that I grabbed from here that had. Let's see if I. All of these had a reason. Of course, I always think I'm going to show a lot more footage, and then we end up just going, and we're done. Let's see here. There's a little divider, more dividers. This was kind of a nice little graphic of those kind of coming together, but I don't think we have time to dig into that too deeply. Yeah, I'm not sure what I think I lost it in that corrupted file, but I feel like the backgrounds that are using LED walls, all I see is moire and aliasing. Maybe evidently not everybody sees that. All I can see is this subtle moire and the aliasing that goes on in front of it. And I think that they do better with the green screen. Go ahead, Courtney. Oh, next question. Sorry, and then we'll go to Courtney.
Next question in for Bob Sturtevant in San Antonio. Bob asks, with the increase in larger TVs and higher resolutions, how might graphics change to take advantage of these increases?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, they no longer protect 4:3, I don't think, for all those people that are stuck in the analog world of television. And title safe is now a thing of the past. I think they can actually take titles out to the edges. 800 by 600 is no longer even protected. So they're assuming that everyone has at least 720p and above for the resolution of the titles and the fonts that are used. So they can use that 2-point text, 2-point font on the bottom for all those disclaimers that are running that telling you, don't drive this car like we did.
Yeah, and by the way, Bo let us know that the ESPN AR shot was done in Cinema 4D and executed in VizRT, and also was tracked with a SkyCam using a TrackMan Vio Track TTL software. So there you go. There's your specific answer for this. The other thing that I think that the larger resolution, we've seen tests of this, I haven't seen it in the wild, is allowing for, if you have an 8K screen, I can show you 4K in one part of it and give you a bunch of other data, and it all holds up. Like if you have a really large 8K screen, there's a bunch of things I can add to it and I can just hit it and it goes back and then it zooms up. And you see a little bit of that with MLB and their streams, where you can see more data and then you can pop back up to it. So some of those interactive elements at higher resolution are going to be interesting. Next question.
Courtney Gooden from Hollywood, California. What is your opinion on the use of artificial digital breakup being used as a graphic style in on-screen graphics and transitions?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, this drives me nuts. It's a pet peeve of mine where they use digital block errors, as a transition style.
NFL uses it for this is an NFL film and you can't, their announcement that you can't use their footage is like just completely destroyed.
No part of this production may,
right. But they use exactly what Courtney's doing, and it's
you can never tell. Is there VCR? Is there play out having a connection problem, or did they design it that way?
Yeah. I prefer to make graphics that don't look like mistakes. I might be old.
Now they're going back to VHS head tracking errors that are laid in over digital stuff.
Yeah. I have to say, by the way, I finally got all my computers lined up. You're not going to see this, but I am seamlessly moving my mouse. I just did it by accident. I suddenly realized I wasn't switching my controller. I was just moving my mouse from computer to computer as I went. Anyway, it's just very fascinating. Go Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, Courtney brings up a good point, because what what we used to consider to be flaws, like flares and things like that, are in, and this is just part of that same genre of special effects or grunge that people like to use.
Next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. How would they feed the graphics into the switcher production infrastructure? Being mostly familiar with the NDI HDMI world, I haven't had to deal with SDI and key fill yet.
Go, Doug.
Yeah, when I started doing graphics in sports, I was on a TriCaster and CharacterWorks, which again, it's a good entry level program, and see Jeff Keithley about that. But it does both. It does NDI input, and then it also does the SDI traditional, which is the key fill. And the key fill is like one channel cuts the video out, and then the second channel, the fill, fills it with whatever's cut. So that's what key fill is. You could spend a whole hour on that. But but now the expression does nothing but key fill. So I use both programs still today, because sometimes it's just easier to pull up last year's project and change a few things and do it. But I'm painfully going through the process of switching to the expression. But it's a good learning tool.
Yeah, and I think my thing is I prefer SDI over other things, mostly because I just want it to be synced and uncompressed. So everything fed to it is going uncompressed. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael again. How did they create the stream of text behind the football? Wouldn't particle systems be only shaped primitives, not extruded text?
I think that you're talking about the streams of text that were behind the football for the AWS, ad. Yeah, I was looking at that the other a moment ago. Let's see if I can.
You can create particles out of anything. It can be text. It's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Those are just. It was probably just generated that way. I mean, it was just there. You have a particle system, and you just tell it you want text, for that to be. For that to go out, and it will definitely. I'm just trying to see if I can find that really fast, and I'm having a hard time getting to that individual. Let me see one more try, and then we're going to give up here. Let's see if I go to.
My guess is yes, they're using that as a design element, because it's talking about culminating a lot of information, which again is representative by letters and numbers.
Yeah, and it is that is pre-rendered, so that's a different setup. So you can definitely render all of that out. That was probably rendered out of Cinema 4D, and composited in After Effects. That'd be my guess. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael again for our last question. Could you conceivably use RealityScan or a similar tool to bring a real horse or boat into the scene quickly?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to ask you on that scene you had with the two players and the horse and the boat. The players were moving. Do you think that was just a video that was on a 3D card, or do you think they actually captured volumetric video of those players and the perspective was changing as the camera moved horizontally?
I think they built a 3D model of those characters and did motion capture and applied it to the characters just standing around motion. They could have probably hand animated it. I wouldn't, because it's much hard. It's so hard. The hardest thing that, in my opinion, to animate is someone not doing anything. It's really easy to animate it when they're doing big moves. It's harder when they're just standing there, just kind of hanging out. It's much easier to capture. It's actually an easy thing for the motion capture to capture, because there's not a lot of occlusion or movement or high frequency changes. So it's really easy for motion capture to do and really hard for an animator to get right. And so typically they wouldn't do volumetric. They would probably just have, and they probably didn't even have those players stand there. They probably just.
So you think that's a 3D model and not actually video capture?
100%. Yeah, those are 3D models of those folks. It's relatively easy once you get it set up. It didn't look like there was enough detail, and I don't even think we saw their face. Like there was. I'd have to jump back to it here. Now the mouse isn't.
And they're tossing the ball back and forth between their hands.
But that's all stuff that's relatively. Let's take a look. Let's take one more look at it here. Yeah. So there's a couple little tricks here. Let's see here. Let's jump to this. So if you look at this here, and we watch it, they're just kind of throwing it back and forth. Yeah, they're not looking at you, and they have visors on, and that's kind of it's a really quick way to have it look great, but they're not going to show you. The visors are going to keep you away from looking straight into their eyes. There's not any major motion there. It doesn't. Yeah, so I do think it's a 3D model.
I think, and if you look at the action of throwing the football back and forth, it may be the same model that they just changed the jersey.
It's identical, Courtney.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it's just these are probably stock animations that not stock animations, but they probably shot they might have shot a couple, but all they have to do is change you change the number. I'm sure that changing the textures and numbers and everything else are pretty straightforward. Yeah, so it's a CG model there that does that, and they probably can just line it up and just give me these two. It's probably just for the quarterbacks, but you can see this is what we're going to see more and more and more of. I mean, and for some reason I couldn't find it easily on the NBC ones, but I know NBC does, of course, the AR stuff as well. But you're going to see more and more of these kind of AR overlays, related to it. And what the crazy thing is that eventually you're going to see it when you put your own goggles on. You're going to put it up there, and you're going to see a bunch of overlap there. So. You can do that, and you can do CG. So there's like 2K captures the scans of the basketball players for 2K Sports, and they actually when you're showing folks, and there is something to be argued. And Bo was talking about that they capture the actual characters, the actual players for some of this stuff. What I will say is that I can look at just like when we used to do a lot of motion capture. I could look at the balls moving around, and there's like 50, 57, 59 markers that are on the person, and I could look at the markers walking and tell you between two different people. Like, oh, I know that's this person or that's that person, and it does make a difference to have the person do the capture because they have a certain way of walking and standing, and we subconsciously will see all of that. So I don't think they did that here, but it does sound like it has been done in the past. All right. Well, we got through about 10% of what I captured and answered. One thing that I wanted to do and that we did differently from the graphics in the past is that I wanted to make sure that we answered questions throughout, because we did this thing the last couple times we've done it, we would talk about it, and then we get to the end and there's like 30 questions left. So we're kind of breaking it up a little bit. We don't get to quite as many of the examples, but we'll keep on looking at this stuff. If there's things you think we should look at, the other one's going to be more basic. If there's enough people that want to see FIFA, I'm happy to do that. I wasn't sure that, and I wasn't as conscious to it. But we'll be talking about super sources, lower thirds, sweepers as separate shows in the upcoming year to kind of keep on paying attention to what is happening in news and what's happening in sports and what's happening in a lot of other things. So that's. But if you see good examples, let us know, and we'll keep on doing these because I think it's important for us to understand it for our own shows what the current what people think is cool, because a lot of times we, if we don't do that. It makes our shows look small. Like when you have to pay attention to broadcast graphics, you don't have to reproduce it, but you have to know what is looking cool at the moment so that your stuff looks good if you're adding those things. Thanks so much to the producers for all the great questions and keeping this all going. Thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. Great conversation. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end making all this happen every single day. Come rain or come shine, 7 days a week. Amazing. So we appreciate all of your hard work to make all of this stuff happen. And, we'll see you again tomorrow because that's what we do. The Tlaloc Traversal, 69,000 miles, 111,000 kilometers, 625 million bananas, and I'll guess about 300 million minions, for the distance that we covered there. So that's pretty a lot of fun. And now we're going to jump into After Hours. We're talking about wireless tomorrow. I meant to say that. Wireless. It's going to be amazing. If you have questions tomorrow, wireless audio, tomorrow is the day. Gary Trenda from Sound of Us.
Can we do it all whispering?
No, we can't.
This only sounds about the same. Mitchell, I know you love whispering, but you can't do it for the whole show. We can only do it underneath the graphics. You can't.
You don't need a CloudLifter to whisper.
Sorry about that.
Banana jumping is really never pretty. Yeah, exactly. Great to see Doug here. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, Doug. Good one. See you, Sky. Cheers.